In 1944, Japanese military engineers drew detailed construction plans for a tunnel complex beneath the island of Iwo Jima. In 1945, American military engineers surveyed those same tunnels after capturing the island at a cost of nearly 7,000 Marines killed. Both sets of plans still exist. The Japanese originals are held at the National Diet Library in Tokyo. The American surveys are archived at the National Archives in Washington. Nobody has ever laid one on top of the other, until now. When you overlay the Japanese construction plans with the American post-battle surveys, the lines don't match. And the places where they don't match raise a question that 70 years of military history has never answered. The Japanese plans show rooms inside the mountain that have no entrance and no exit, rooms drawn by engineers, approved by officers, marked as completed, rooms with no doors. This is what those maps show, and this is what no one has been able to explain. February 19th, 1945, 0900 hours. Iwo Jima. The first wave of United States Marines hits the beach. Above them, Mount Suribachi rises 554 feet from the island's southern tip, a dormant volcano. Its slopes are barren, stripped of vegetation by months of naval bombardment and aerial attack. From the surface, the mountain appears dead. It is not dead. It is occupied. Beneath the surface of Suribachi and extending across the entire 8 square miles of Iwo Jima, the Japanese have constructed the most elaborate underground military fortress in the history of warfare. 11 miles of tunnels, over 1,500 individual rooms, command centers, hospitals, ammunition storage, barracks, communication stations, water collection cisterns, and ventilation shafts drilled through volcanic rock at temperatures exceeding 140 degrees Fahrenheit. General Tadamichi Kuribayashi had spent 8 months building this fortress. He had studied the American island hopping campaign. He had watched the Marines overwhelm the defenses at Tarawa, Saipan, Guam, and Peleliu. He understood that defending the beaches was futile, so he moved the entire defense underground. 21,000 Japanese soldiers occupied these tunnels on the morning the Marines landed. 36 days later, 20,703 of them were dead. The Marines sealed the tunnels. Hundreds of entrances were closed with demolition charges, bulldozed coral, and poured concrete. The island fell silent, but the tunnels remained, and the maps tell a story that the silence never could. To understand what the maps show, you first need to understand how they were made, and why 2 sets of maps created independently by 2 different armies should in theory match perfectly. The Japanese construction plans were created between June 1944 and February 1945 by engineers of the 204th Naval Construction Battalion and supporting engineering units under the direct supervision of General Kuribayashi's staff. These plans were working documents. Every tunnel section, every room, every ventilation shaft, every connecting passage was drawn to scale and documented with measurements, rock-type classifications, and completion dates. Japanese military engineering documentation was extraordinarily precise. This was not approximate sketching. These were construction blueprints created by trained engineers following Imperial Japanese Navy drafting standards, standards that specified line weights, measurement notations, symbol conventions, and approval signatures. Each plan sheet was reviewed by the section engineer, countersigned by the battalion commander, and filed with the island garrison headquarters. The plans were essential for coordinating the defense. Every fighting position needed to connect to supply routes, medical facilities, and command communications. The plans survived the battle because the Japanese headquarters complex, located deep beneath the northern plateau of the island, was not fully destroyed during the fighting. When American forces eventually cleared the complex in late March 1945, they recovered thousands of documents, including the complete construction plans for the tunnel network. These plans were shipped to the United States for intelligence analysis. They were studied, translated, and filed. They currently reside in Record Group 127 at the National Archives. The American survey maps were created between March and September 1945 by U.S. Navy Seabees and Marine Corps engineering units tasked with assessing the captured tunnel network. The American surveys had a different purpose than the Japanese plans. The Americans weren't building the tunnels, they were trying to understand them, their extent, their connections, their structural stability, and most importantly, whether they still contained Japanese defenders. The American engineers entered the tunnels with measuring equipment, flashlights, and armed escorts. They mapped every passage they could access. They noted dimensions, distances between junctions, room sizes, and structural conditions. They documented sealed sections, collapsed passages, and areas deemed too dangerous or too hot to enter. The American surveys are not as complete as the Japanese plans. The engineers could not reach every section. Some passages were blocked by combat damage. Others were sealed by Japanese demolitions during the battle. Still others were too thermally hostile. Temperatures in deep sections exceeded 160 degrees Fahrenheit, making sustained human presence impossible. But where the American surveys do cover the same sections as the Japanese plans, the two should match. They should show the same tunnels in the same locations with the same dimensions, connecting to the same rooms. They don't. The discrepancies between the Japanese plans and the American surveys fall into three categories. The first two are explainable, the third is not. Category 1. Sections shown on the Japanese plans that do not appear on the American surveys. This is expected. The Japanese plans show the complete intended tunnel network. The Americans could not access every section. Collapsed passages, sealed entrances, and extreme temperatures prevented the American engineers from surveying approximately 40% of the tunnel system. Sections that the Japanese drew but the Americans couldn't reach simply reflect the limits of the post-battle survey. Nothing unusual, nothing unexplained. Category 2. Sections shown on the American surveys that do not appear on the Japanese plans. This is also explainable, mostly. During the battle, both Japanese defenders and American attackers created modifications to the tunnel system. Japanese soldiers sealed passages behind them as they retreated deeper into the mountain. Americans blasted new openings with demolition charges. Combat damage opened some rock faces while closing others. Some sections the Americans surveyed may have been created by the battle itself. Accidental cavities opened by explosions or natural volcanic voids exposed by combat damage. These sections would appear on the American surveys but not on the Japanese construction plans because they didn't exist when the plans were drawn. Expected, explainable, unremarkable. Category 3. Rooms shown on the Japanese construction plans that are drawn as completed, enclosed and isolated, not connected to any tunnel, not accessible through any passage, not reached by any shaft, corridor, stairway, or opening of any kind. Rooms inside solid volcanic rock with no way in and no way out. 3 of them. Drawn on the deepest level of the Mount Suribachi tunnel complex, approximately 75 feet below the surface of the island, designated on the Japanese plans as Room S31, Room S32, and Room S33. Drawn with squared corners. Uniform dimensions. Precise measurements noted in the margins. S31, 4 meters by 6 meters. S32, 4 meters by 4 meters. S33, 8 meters by 4 meters. Each room is drawn as a completed space, not a planned future excavation, not a proposal, completed. The Japanese engineering notation for completed and inspected, a specific stamp mark used on the plans, appears on all three rooms: completed rooms, inspected rooms, approved rooms, with no entrance. The American survey does not show these rooms. The American engineers never reached the deepest levels of the Suribachi complex. The heat, the gas, and the structural instability made the deepest sections inaccessible. So the only evidence that rooms S31, S32, and S33 exist is the Japanese plans themselves, plans drawn by engineers who had no reason to fabricate rooms, plans reviewed by officers who signed their names to the accuracy of the documentation. Plans that were working construction documents used to coordinate the defense of 21,000 men. These engineers drew rooms with no doors. The question is why? There are 4 possible explanations. I'm going to walk through each one. 3 of them can be eliminated by the evidence. The 4th cannot. Explanation 1. Drafting error, the simplest explanation. Someone made a mistake. A draftsman drew rooms that don't exist in a location where no rooms were built. An administrative error that was never caught. This explanation fails for 3 reasons. First, Japanese military engineering drafts were reviewed by multiple officers before being approved. The completion stamp on rooms S31 through S33 indicates that a supervising engineer physically inspected the work and verified that it matched the plans. 3 separate rooms, all stamped as completed and inspected, all drawn by the same draftsman, all reviewed by the same supervisor. A single error might survive this process. 3 identical errors in the same section of the same plan sheet would not. Second, the rooms are drawn with precise internal dimensions. S31 is 4 by 6 meters, S32 is 4 by 4, S33 is 8 by 4. If a draftsman accidentally drew rooms that didn't exist, why would he assign each one specific and different measurements? Errors produce vague marks, not precisely dimensioned architectural spaces. Third, the rooms are positioned in logical relationship to each other. They are arranged in a rough line on the same horizontal level, spaced at intervals consistent with the structural constraints of the volcanic rock in that section. Their placement follows the engineering logic of the surrounding tunnel system. They don't look like mistakes. They look like they were designed. Drafting error can be effectively ruled out. Explanation 2. Planned rooms that were never constructed. Perhaps the engineers drew these rooms as part of the construction plan but never actually built them. The plans show what was intended, not what was completed. This explanation fails for one reason: the completion stamp. Japanese engineering documentation used specific notation to distinguish between planned construction, construction in progress, and completed construction. Planned rooms were marked with a different symbol than completed rooms. The distinction was important because the construction plans were used for defensive planning. Commanders needed to know which spaces were available for use and which were still under construction. Rooms S31 through S33 bear the completed and inspected stamp. This means a supervising engineer certified that these rooms existed and matched the specifications on the plans. If the rooms were never built, the completion stamp would not be present. If the completion stamp is fraudulent, it means an officer falsified an official military document during wartime, an offense punishable by court-martial under Imperial Japanese military law. This explanation requires either bureaucratic error at a level inconsistent with Japanese military precision or deliberate fraud with no apparent motive. It can be effectively ruled out. Explanation 3. Natural cavities. Mount Suribachi is a volcanic formation. Volcanic rock frequently contains natural voids, gas pockets, lava tubes, collapsed magma chambers that can create enclosed spaces within solid rock. Perhaps the Japanese engineers discovered natural cavities during excavation, documented them on the plans for completeness, but didn't connect them to the tunnel system because they were structurally unstable or too small to be useful. This explanation is partially plausible, but it fails on the details. Natural volcanic cavities are irregular. They have curved walls, uneven floors, and unpredictable dimensions. They do not have squared corners. Rooms S31, S32, and S33 are drawn with squared corners and uniform dimensions. S31 is a precise rectangle. S32 is a perfect square. S33 is an elongated rectangle with dimensions exactly double those of S32. These are not natural formations, these are engineered spaces. Furthermore, natural cavities would not receive the completed and inspected stamp. You don't inspect a natural void, you inspect something that was built. This explanation can be partially ruled out. The rooms could theoretically be natural cavities that were modified, squared off and measured, but this requires the engineers to have access to cavities. Which brings us back to the central problem. How do you access a room with no entrance? Explanation 4. The rooms were connected to the tunnel system by passages that were subsequently sealed and removed from the plans. This is the only explanation that survives scrutiny, and it raises more questions than it answers. If connecting passages existed and were later sealed, who sealed them? If the passages were sealed, why were they removed from the plans? The rest of the tunnel system shows sealed passages clearly, marked with the Japanese engineering notation for passage sealed by demolition or passage blocked by collapse. These markings appear throughout the plans. Japanese engineers documented sealed passages. It was standard practice, but no sealed passage notation appears anywhere near rooms S31, S32, and S33. The plans show solid rock on all sides, not sealed passages, not collapsed tunnels, solid, undisturbed volcanic rock. For this explanation to work, someone would have had to excavate connecting passages to these three rooms, complete the rooms, have them inspected and stamped, then seal the connecting passages so completely that they are indistinguishable from solid rock on the plans, and then redraw the plans to remove any evidence that the passages ever existed. That is an enormous amount of effort to hide three rooms. What would justify that effort? What would need to be sealed inside a room with no entrance, 75 feet below the surface of a volcanic island in the middle of the Pacific Ocean during the largest war in human history? The Japanese garrison on Iwo Jima was not a normal military force. This is important context for understanding what the sealed rooms might have contained. General Kuribayashi's command included standard infantry and naval units, but it also included detachments from organizations that operated outside normal military channels. Captured documents recovered from the headquarters complex reference personnel, designated as technical specialists assigned to Suribachi section, the deepest tunnel sections beneath the mountain. These personnel are identified by code designations rather than standard military ranks or unit assignments. Their specialization is not specified in the documents. What is specified is their security clearance level. The captured documents reference a clearance designation that translates approximately as Imperial Research Authorization, a classification that does not correspond to any standard clearance in the Japanese military hierarchy. Historians who have studied Japanese wartime research programs have noted that similar classification language appears in documents related to several known programs. Unit 731, the Biological Warfare Research Complex in Manchuria, where approximately 3,000 prisoners were killed in human experiments. The FGO project, the Imperial Japanese Navy's Nuclear Weapons Research Program, the Noborito Laboratory, the Japanese Army's Chemical and Biological Weapons Development Facility that also conducted research into unconventional areas that the post-war Allied intelligence assessments described carefully as scientific programs of uncertain classification. Scientific programs of uncertain classification. That phrase appears in a 1946 U.S. Army intelligence assessment of captured Japanese research documents. The assessment lists several Japanese wartime research programs that the analysts could not categorize using standard military or scientific frameworks. The assessment was classified until 1998. Its contents have received almost no scholarly attention. Among the programs listed under uncertain classification are 3 that reference island-based research facilities in the Pacific. The islands are identified by code names, not geographic names. One code name translates from Japanese as Furnace Mountain. Suribachi means grinding bowl in Japanese. But among the garrison troops, the mountain had a nickname documented in several captured personal diaries. They called it the Furnace. This is circumstantial. It is not proof. A nickname shared between a code name in a classified intelligence assessment and a colloquial term used by garrison troops does not constitute definitive evidence that Iwo Jima hosted a secret research facility. But it is consistent, and it would explain the rooms. If rooms S31, S32, and S33 were part of a classified research facility hidden within the larger tunnel complex, several otherwise inexplicable details become coherent. The room's isolation from the main tunnel network would serve a security purpose. A facility that cannot be reached through the standard tunnel system cannot be found by personnel who are not authorized to know about it. 21,000 soldiers lived and fought in those tunnels. If 3 rooms were reserved for classified research, disconnecting them from the main network would prevent unauthorized access. The precise dimensions would reflect functional requirements. S31 at 4 by 6 meters is the size of a small laboratory. S32 at 4 by 4 is the size of a storage or equipment room. S33 at 8 by 4 is the size of a workspace or assembly area. The removal of connecting passages from the plans would serve an operational security function. If the plans were captured, which they were, the existence of a hidden facility within the larger complex would be invisible. The Americans would survey the tunnels they could access, compare them to the plans, and conclude they had mapped the system. 3 rooms with no entrances would be dismissed as anomalies, which is exactly what happened. The completed and inspected stamps would indicate that the rooms were built, verified, and ready for use. The personnel with Imperial Research Authorization clearance would know how to access them through passages not shown on the standard plans, passages known only to them. When the battle began, these personnel would have had 2 options: destroy the research and seal the access passages permanently, or retreat into the rooms and seal themselves inside, retreat into sealed rooms 75 feet below the surface, with no way out. If this interpretation is correct, there may be remains inside those rooms that have never been found, not combat casualties, not ordinary soldiers, researchers, specialists, men who sealed themselves inside their own laboratory rather than allow their work to be captured. And their work, whatever it was, may still be in there with them. The Japanese government has conducted periodic recovery operations on Iwo Jima since the 1950s. As of 2023, approximately 10,000 remains have been recovered from the island. Approximately 11,000 remain unrecovered. The deep sections of the Mount Suribachi tunnel complex, the sections where rooms S31, S32, and S33 are indicated on the Japanese plans, have never been fully explored. Ground temperatures at that depth still exceed 130 degrees Fahrenheit. Sulfuric gas concentrations remain hazardous. The structural stability of 75-year-old volcanic rock tunnels is uncertain. Modern ground-penetrating radar could theoretically verify whether enclosed void spaces exist at the locations indicated on the Japanese plans without requiring physical entry into the tunnels. This technology exists. It has been used successfully at archaeological sites worldwide to detect buried chambers, tunnels, and hidden rooms. As of 2024, no ground-penetrating radar survey of the deep Suribachi tunnel sections has been conducted, or if it has been conducted, the results have not been published. In 2019, a Japanese recovery team entered a previously unexplored section of the tunnel system beneath Mount Suribachi. They were searching for remains in the upper levels, not the deep sections where S-31 through S-33 are located. The team recovered the remains of 14 Japanese soldiers in a sealed chamber at the end of a passage approximately 40 feet below the surface. The chamber had been sealed from the inside. The 14 men had sealed themselves in deliberately. Their remains were positioned facing the sealed entrance, as if they were watching the door. The recovery team leader told NHK, and I quote, "When we entered the cavern, the air was different, heavy. It felt occupied. I know that sounds irrational, but every member of our team felt it. One of our team members, a veteran of 12 previous recovery operations, refused to continue past the entrance. He said the cavern did not want us there," end quote. That chamber was at 40 feet. Rooms S-31, S-32, and S-33 are at 35 feet deeper, further from the surface, further from the light, further from anything the recovery teams have ever reached. I need to be clear about what we know and what we don't. We know the Japanese construction plans show 3 rooms with no entrance. This is documented. The plans are in the National Archives. Anyone can examine them. We know the American surveys do not show these rooms. The American engineers never reached the deepest sections. We know the rooms bear completion stamps indicating they were built and inspected by a supervising engineer. We know that personnel with unusual security clearances were assigned to the Suribachi tunnel section. This is documented in captured records. We know that a 1946 U.S. intelligence assessment references Japanese research programs of uncertain classification associated with island facilities in the Pacific. One code name is consistent with a nickname for Mount Suribachi. We know that no ground-penetrating radar survey of the deep sections has been conducted, or if it has, the results remain unpublished. We do not know what the rooms contained. We do not know if they are natural cavities, engineered spaces, or something else entirely. We do not know if remains or equipment are inside them. We do not know because no one has looked. 75 feet below the surface of Mount Suribachi, in volcanic rock that still radiates enough heat to kill an unprotected human in minutes, 3 rooms may exist that were deliberately cut off from the world in 1945. Rooms built by engineers who documented everything except how to get inside. Rooms inspected by officers who certified their completion, then erased the path to reach them. Rooms that may contain the remains of men who chose burial over capture and research that no one was meant to find, or rooms that were never built at all. Drafting anomalies on a 70-year-old piece of paper. Curiosities that signify nothing. The plans are in the National Archives. The technology to verify exists. The location is known. Someone could answer this question. The question is whether anyone has, and whether they told the rest of us what they found. Mount Suribachi stands 554 feet above the Pacific Ocean. Beneath it, 11 miles of tunnels wind through volcanic rock. Somewhere in the deepest sections, the Japanese plans show 3 rooms with no entrance, S-31, S-32, S-33. They were drawn in 1944. They were stamped as complete. And as far as the public record is concerned, no one has ever been inside them. I want to ask you something. You are a military engineer. You have been ordered to draw construction plans for an underground fortress. Every room you draw must be accurate. Every measurement must be precise. Every room you mark as completed will be inspected by your commanding officer, who will sign his name, certifying that the room exists exactly as you drew it. Your plans will be used by 21,000 soldiers to navigate the tunnels they will fight and die in. Now here is my question. Why would you draw 3 rooms with no entrance, rooms with no doors, no connecting tunnels, no way in, no way out, surrounded on all sides by solid rock, and stamp each one as completed and inspected. Why would an engineer do that? By the end of this video, you will have seen the actual plans. You will have seen where the rooms are drawn. You will have heard every possible explanation. 3 of them can be eliminated by the evidence. The 4th cannot. I want your answer in the comments. Not what you think sounds reasonable, what you believe actually happened, because the engineers who drew these rooms are dead. The officers who approved them are dead. The 21,000 soldiers who lived in those tunnels are almost all dead. Nobody who knows the answer is left to give it. So I am asking you, February 19th, 1945, 0900 hours, Iwo Jima.